Hi, welcome to the Engaging People with Developmental Disabilities in the OPWDD Systems webinar. We have with us this morning Steve Holmes and BJ Stasio from SANI's, and they're going to do the presentation for us. Before we start, I'd like to do a few housekeeping things. In order to ask questions, on the panel that's on the side of your screen, that should be on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a thing that looks like a little hand and an arrow, and you can just raise your hand. Everybody is on mute currently, but if you raise your hand, I will unmute you and you'll be able to answer or ask your question out loud. If you have any questions that are not related to the speakers, just type in the question box, and then I will be able to see them. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Steve and BJ.
Well, hi, everybody. This is Steve Holmes, and I'm the Administrative Director of the Self-Advocacy Association of New York State. I work for the board of SANI's, and we're delighted to be here today. I'll just say quickly before BJ introduces himself that Self-Advocacy has been working with NYAIL for this last year or two on consulting and giving them information and support for their project based on the connections that we have throughout New York. And we're really excited about it, the MFP, and helping people to know about their options for where they can be living in the future, and the kind of life that they want to live is a great thing and important. And I'll turn it over to BJ, and then I'll talk a little bit about SANI's.
And Steve, you had also said to me that you really wanted people to ask questions at the way this.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we think this presentation will go. It would be not a problem if you ask questions whenever you have them, and we can have some dialogue, especially if you have any question about a particular slide or something that we're talking about. This is we welcome and think this will work a lot better with dialogue and knowing the things that you want to talk about related to the topic.
Thank you for allowing us to speak to you today. I'm a long-time self-advocate, and I'm also a 15-year state employee for the Western New York DDSO Region 1. I coordinate all self-advocacy activities for Western Region 1, the Western New York area.
Thanks, BJ. So I think you can move the slide if you want, Suzanne. And then you can, again. So SANI's mission is we're an organization run by and for people with developmental disabilities, and our mission is we help people with developmental disabilities speak up for themselves and others. And just as a note, when we use the word others, we're talking about all people with developmental disabilities, including people who are self-advocates and also people who need a lot of help to speak up for themselves. And I think when we go and visit people who are in some of the 12-person houses in New York State, especially some of the ICFs, you'll find lots of people who need a lot of support in making decisions and speaking up for themselves. And we, in all of our policy statements, all the things that we work on are aimed at supporting their lives, their dreams, and their hopes as well. So next slide, Suzanne. So this is just a quick chart about how self-advocacy is organized, and it'll help you to understand how we can help you in different regions. We have a statewide board. We have 7 actual regional offices. We are formed, self-advocates come together, and in the bottom you see individualized self-advocacy. We have thousands of self-advocates who are members of our organization. They form groups. Those groups are part of regions, and in the regions elect our board. So it's an organization that's run by and for self-advocates, and we've been involved. We've been organized since 1986. We have a long history, and this is part of the goal of our organization: help everybody get the life they want, and to be able to move and live and work and be supported in the kinds of things they want to do in their life. So next slide. So BJ, this is where we're gonna start out going back and forth. So how about you? How about if you take over?
Well, what we know about ICFs and large IRAs. ICFs were designed for, as I was telling Steve last night, when I'm reminded of ICFs, I'm reminded of one goal everybody talks about, the toothbrushing goal, because the ICFs focus on the minimum, in my opinion, the minimum capacity of what the person could do, instead of seeing the picture for the person as a whole. That's why the MFP project, to me as a self-advocate, is very important. And large IRAs kind of set up the thing where one person goes somewhere, everybody has to go. Like around this system and all systems throughout New York State, we have this term called van ride. Everybody's going on a van ride because if one person wants to go, everybody has to go. So basically large IRAs didn't work, and some are still large. That's why we're trying to get everybody out into the community so they explore who they are, no matter if they can speak for themselves or not.
So I'll add a little bit here, you know, and if you were on the previous webinar that we did, we spoke about how OPWDD got into the situation where we have so many people living in large settings, and we have 18,000, more than 18,000 people living in settings with more than 8 people, and most of them are 12-person homes, and it dates back to the closure of institutions in the 80s and late 70s, early, and all through the 80s. And you know, it's something that you know, the MFP project is important because one of the goals is to get everybody living in smaller settings, part of the home and community-based settings rule, but also, you know, a long-term plan for our, you know, for change and transformation. And it's going to take a lot of work. And the MFP project is a great way to kind of you know, make sure people understand their options and choices, and their families understand their options and choices, and the staff understands the options and choices that people have, and to begin to try to identify who right away are interested in changing where they live. And sometimes it takes a little bit of work with some people who might say they want to do something and the family might not feel so comfortable. So it's a great way to just begin to engage in the process of giving people choices and options, and getting the process rolling, and really hopefully into a person-centered, a very robust person-centered planning process that helps a person think about, you know, what's the next best place for them. Anyways, we're just delighted to be part of the MFP project. Our organization, I think we spoke to about 1,500 people in ICFs last year as we did some of the project ourselves, and it was very instructive, and we know it's a lot of work, and we appreciate what you're doing. So next slide. Yeah. So BJ, you're doing this one, right?
Yes, sir. When speaking to the person with the disability, you presume that they're competent, but you may know that people in ICFs need help to speak for themselves, and what you have to do, like if they're nonverbal or have difficulty communicating, you need to rely on the staff to tell you what Johnny likes or Susie likes. But the thing about the MF project, which I hope will come out of it, that the staff learn something about the individual that they never thought about before. Like if Johnny likes to go for coffee, he doesn't have to have it at home at 10 o'clock. He can have it at Tim Hortons and meet with the lady Judy, and the waitress Judy can say hello to him every day. That's making the connection in the community that all of us as human beings want. All of us desire that connection and make an impression on people, because the lasting impression you make will educate everybody.
Thanks, BJ. So, you know, one of the things that to think about when you're communicating with the ICF or the IRA, the group, the place that you go to with the staff in preparation for a presentation, and what we did when we did it and we were able to get other people there, it was very effective. For people who need a lot of support and don't speak for themselves or have guardians and relatives, having some of those folks at these presentations, brothers and sisters, and we had at times, and the staff who really know them well, who can help people understand, so as we were talking about the options, could help, represent and support the person to say what they like and enhance the presentation and people's understanding of the opportunity, because this is a real opportunity for people, and that's the way we looked at the presentations. So I think we can move on, Suzanne. I think we sort of worked with that one, right? So I'll start with this one, BJ, and we can both talk about this one. One of the challenges is, some of the staff who work in the places are very excited about this point of view, and some staff are very, might be changed by this because they're worried about what will happen if people move out, and then other staff just aren't that, might be new staff. So I think that in working with staff, I think we just need to know that some are going to be very interested in what we have to say, others may not be so interested. Some people may have a lot of questions about it. The staff who know the people and really know what people want are really important people in this discussion, as we're trying to explain to people what their opportunity. And so I think be really open to explaining what we're doing with staff, and know that sometimes people may not seem as interested. Some may not be as interested in others, and I think that part of what we can be doing when we're doing these types of presentations is also inspiring and informing and teaching the staff about opportunities that people have as well. You want to add to that, BJ?
Sure, and from my view, from both as an advocate and somebody who works for OPWDD, it's important to involve the staff in the process because, as Steve said, they're very involved in the individual's life. Sometimes they don't have the family connection, and the staff is their family, and you have to get them to see beyond the great caregiver role that they do, because they do a great job. They do a lot for the money they make. Their great staff are great, but you have to include them as the team and help them see that there is more to the person. Not that they don't know that, but they've never really thought about, well, maybe Johnny would like to go for coffee at Tim Hortons. Let's give it a shot.
So I think we can move on to the next one, Suzanne. Does anybody have any questions? Any thoughts?
No question is a dumb question.
Okay, we'll keep going. So we've talked a little bit about the involvement of families, but it would be, it's really important for many of the people living in ICFs. It's really important. Some of our experience is that some families might feel very comfortable where a person is, and might be very threatened or a little bit scared by the thought that a person might move out of some place that they think is good. So part of the things that we can do in presentations is talk about the supports that people will get, and also the opportunities that people have by living in the community, and the challenges of supporting people who are living with the amount of people that are living in these homes. It's very hard for anybody to get any real individualized supports. It's hard, what we end up seeing in many of the situations where people live in the homes, or people going out in group settings, out in group outings with large, going out in the big vans and being with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people, sometimes more. And the opportunities of Money Follows a Person is for people to have the choice of where they live, most likely with lots with much less people, and then within that have many more choices of the things they do during the day. And so part of what our job is, I think, when we're talking with families, is for them to understand that these are good choices for people, and that the family's involvement is really important. And as it says in the slide, we also know that some families are very involved with people, and some families have no family involvement. And the family involvement, in some cases, can be an obstacle to a person moving, for what I said earlier. And I think that presentations like the MFP that involve families can really help people get a broader point of view of what's possible, and an understanding of the systemic change that's happening in our system, and the fact that things are likely going to be changing, and we need them to be involved and to help their brother, sister, son, or daughter, to be able to make the choices that they need, or to make the choices, with a team for them. So I'll just keep asking about questions, because we love questions, and we're assuming people are having some experiences already doing this. So if you're having any issues or concerns, we'd love to hear them. And other than that, we could.
This is Susie.
Go ahead.
I think sometimes people don't realize that the family may not be involved for a good reason. So, for example, a lot of the people that we're serving are older, and you might have, parents who are quite elderly, and maybe in a nursing home themselves, and so the level of involvement it's just not possible. And that is always a possibility for what's going on in terms of family.
Absolutely, yeah. And sometimes people have just lost, they've just lost contact with their brothers and sisters, and other people that might be involved. But one of the things that happens for many people is they have friends or people that they've got connected with. One of the best resources that some people have who live in the homes that we're talking about here might be staff who have worked with them in the past, who have stayed in contact with them. We've seen that happen a lot. So I think it's, when you're meeting with the staff of the agency, encourage them for the present, when you're talking with them about the presentation, encourage them to invite anybody who might be interested in the lives and support in any way the people who are living in the house, so that they can hear the presentation as well. So we're going to talk about the structure. I think you probably have an understanding of that, but we thought we'd just help a little bit with that. BJ, you're going to start out there, I think.
Sure. And state operated for ICFs and IRAs is a very interesting dynamic. State operations, for example, which I have a great deal of experience with, has a administrative tree which can kind of be different. Like the team aspect, the treatment team leader for a set of homes, and there's the QIDP, which used to be called the QMRP, which was a qualified mental retardation professional. That's before mental retardation was taken out of the language for OPWDD. What the QIDP does is help set up the ResHab plans and all that stuff, and there's still the MSC involvement. There used to be state MSCs which oversaw a set of homes, and now it's much better that there are voluntary MSCs, because they're kind of neutral and learning about the state system and dealing with it. And for OPWDD specifically, there's a regional director which oversees the voluntaries, and there's a state-operated director which oversees state operations. So the split that happened can sometimes create problems with a person getting the services they need, because everybody's learning the process of where they need to go, and voluntaries are a lot different. The regulations are the same, but state operations is more, at least now, rigid, but starting to loosen up, because it needs to loosen up as the transformational agenda happens. And it's happening quickly. And for me as an advocate, it's about time.
So, BJ,
that's
I think
a personal statement.
this is kind of one of the areas where there's been some confusion, that there really is this whole administrative shift where the state ops are under, a whole different system. They're under the DDSOO, and then the voluntaries are under the DDRO. And I think that's one of the things that our staff, conceptually find challenging. That it's really a whole different line, and you call the people different things. So the person that you call a residence manager maybe in the voluntary might be called a team leader in the state op, things like that. Right.
It's definitely confusing, and there is, there's a lot of differences in the system. In the last couple of years, and certainly in this past year, with the closure of the developmental centers, many people have moved out of some of the homes that existed and have moved out of the developmental center into existing homes, and some of those people have some specialized needs because of the places that they've been living and some of their past issues, and a need for a lot of support, and still should be offered these opportunities. And that's one of the advocacy issues for us all. I mean, I think that we want to make sure that everybody who lives in the homes have opportunities for to look at smaller residences and more person-centered living situations, and it's going to take some time. But and in some of the houses with the state-operated facilities, there might be some resistance. We don't know. We haven't presented to as many of those folks, and you might have already had some experience. We'd love to hear it because we could help advocate around it. But you'll see that also in some of the agencies that provide services, the provider organizations, and some of the history of all this for them is, and one of the challenges for providers is that right now we don't know where money would come from to support some of the transformation, and that's one of the things that we as an organization are advocating for. But that should not be an obstacle for people learning about their options and being able to ask and request and begin to dream and think about different places they would like to live and how they would like to live. That's the way our system is evolving and changing. That's the way the supports are changing. And so the MFP presentations are great opportunities for people who don't know their options, and the families who don't know their options, and staff who don't know their options, to get an idea of what's possible. And and it's up to us for advocates and the systems to figure out how we make sure resources are available for people who make those decisions of things that they want to do. And but so there's a little bit of a conflict in there in both sides of state and voluntary operated situations, and these are the kinds of things we're going to work through. And I think that it's just a dynamic, and some of the resistance you might see could be by organizations that are just a little bit fearful about the impact, and we just got to kind of let people know that that's separate. That fear and those concerns are separate from people understanding and knowing what their rights are and what their opportunities are. And again, we talked a little bit about the staff, but when you're approaching agencies and the state operated, and I can speak better to the agencies because I was once an executive director. It's always best to go to the residential manager for these things directly, but you might have to call a director of residential services in an agency to find out who those folks are and to get the contacts. That's probably the first place to start. And if you're having a hard time with that, it's always okay to call the executive director of the organization. But we usually try to make contacts at the director of residential level. We're pretty sure that the agencies know that I'm sure the agencies know that the MFP project is in the works, and they should have some awareness of it, and they would be supportive. And then basically, you just keep one of the hints about knowing about when you're calling a residential director is you don't want to call a residential director during the middle of the day. They're probably out doing something, first thing in the morning or later or sometime in the afternoon is probably the best time to reach them. You can certainly try calling and leave a message, but those times are probably some of the better times to reach people. And if you don't reach people, keep going up the chain of the organizational chart till you get some cooperation. But I'm pretty sure people are going to be aware of this, and you should be getting some pretty good reception at this point. The supervisor on the list are basically supervisors are people who are in the evening and weekend times, who are in charge of the shifts that they have within the homes. And of course, in the provider sector, MSCs, everybody has an MSc or should have an MSc, and they also are people who should be invited to the presentations because they are the ones that would help coordinate people's plans and respond to people's requests for looking into a new opportunity. And that's one of the things that, in some ways, all we're really trying to do is give people some idea about what else is possible, and that they have an opportunity to just explore it. And then also to make a choice to live in a different place or to move towards a different place. And related to this, if for those of you who are familiar with the home and community-based settings rule, here's a good place to insert that. One of the options that everybody will have under that rule is to choose where they live. It might not happen immediately, but everybody has a right to say, I want to live in another place. And so I think that the HCBS settings rules has some empowerment, adds some empowerment to the MFP concept. And but first of all, we have to get people interested and to understand their options and any families that are in their lives as well. So,
Steve,
any questions on structure? Oh, go ahead.
Just to clarify, some of the people that we work with do not have MSCs yet. These are individuals who are in ICFs, so they have QIDP.
Oh, right. So the ICF, that's right. A lot of those folks have with the QIDP. So
right, but a lot of them, because when they move to an IRA from the ICF, then they would be selecting an MSc. So that's one of the things that our staff are able to do is if an individual has not already selected an MSc, our staff can actually facilitate that process, help the individual or the family member interview MSCs and find one that really matches their needs.
Yeah. Yes, and the MFP project is first focusing on the ICFs, absolutely.
If I could speak to that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
That was a good point, thank you, because most of the individuals I worked with through the transition didn't have an MSc. They had a case manager, so they had to go through what is known, for those of you who don't know, the front door to receive the new services that they would receive. So during that front door process, they were introduced to agencies which provided MSc. They were given information. Then, if the individual was nonverbal or needed help, they had an advocate such as myself or the advocacy office, which we have here, work with them through the process to find the right MSc or interview an MSc to see if it was a good fit. So that was one of the interesting things here. It was like, what is an MSc? Not even some of the staff knew. They were so used to the case manager. It was an education for them too. And another one of the interesting things, which I'm glad about and enjoying, was to have the opportunity to train new employees as the system changes, because they don't know the old system. They're learning this new one. So when these things come up with the MFP interviews, they'll be more receptive to that because they don't know the old system. They're learning from the advocates now and the new generation of advocates who will come after me. And Steve.
So, BJ, can I just ask you, so you said that there's case managers. Are there case managers in the state ops system in addition to the QIDPs?
Some still do have that because some homes, at least here in Western, have not finished the transition yet. So there are still some, but
And what's the role of the case manager? Like, how would we interact with them? Is the case manager, like, are they the one who would call a discharge planning meeting, or what's their role?
Their role is basically to be the linkage to things that they might want to work with the team to develop a new RESHAB goal, to give them a new day program to go to. I don't think for a case manager it was ever thought of, at least not here from my point of view, now this is my point of view, that a person has an option to live in the setting they wish. So in my view, it's good that the change is happening because the MSCs are learning about the transition and to make the changes. So the case manager is still a part of the team process because the individual and the family probably knows the case manager best, and they have to learn the MSC role. As a matter of fact, I had a family member who has a relative who's lived here for years or so call me and ask me to explain what an MSC does because the case manager always took care of her questions. And one of the most interesting questions for me was, will the services change for the better or for the worse? And I said, well, with the transition, it should work better. Your son will get opportunities to do more things, and people will come to him and ask him what he wants, where they never have asked him before. The assumption from the staff and the family, while he's be taken care of, he's getting what he wants. And through this whole process, he now has people asking him, and now he has a voice through this entire process.
So, BJ, just to be concrete, because that's the way I like the world, if a transition specialist is trying to set up a meeting with an individual in a state op, if they have case managers, is it better to call the residence manager or the case manager, or does it kind of vary by house?
It varies by house, and the way they honestly do it here, which I like, is they call the term I don't like, but they call a planning team meeting, so everybody is on the same page with the entire process, because nobody should go through this process alone. It should be a team effort, and if possible, have the family or the advocate available through this process. Because
so those planning team meetings, those are absolutely what we want to be invited to. So
yes.
Who generally speaking sets those meetings up?
Well, for now, until the person finds the MSC, it is the case manager who starts the chain of the meetings, gets everybody together. And one thing I honestly like about the MSCs, and the case managers are learning this from advocates who talk to them, it's the person's right or the family member who's supporting the individual and or the staff to help come up with the agenda for the meeting. Because so many times it's been, well, this service is working for this person, is Johnny or Susie, meaning their toothbrushing goal. Do they have to spend a longer time brushing their teeth? It's never been the broad goal of, if you want to live somewhere different, if you want to live with somebody different, that was never brought up. It was never thought about. So I'm glad the MFP process is here. I'm glad. So thank you for that. Hopefully that helps some.
Thanks, BJ. So we were going to talk about some of the day services that people have, and I think BJ, I'll start off with workshops, and then you take one maybe, or do you want to do the opposite?
Yeah, whatever you want to do, it's fine.
Okay.
We're working
So
together.
let's make comments on each one. So we'll each make comments on the
Sure,
topic.
no problem.
Great. It's like we've been doing. So I think everybody knows that workshops are going to be evolving. OPWDD calls them transitioning into other types of entities in New York State, and hopefully some people will also be leaving workshops and going into employment or into individualized supports that work for them. It's a big It's a big part of the transformation in New York. It's going to take some time. Ironically, in our state, and just to give you some specifics, we have about between 7,000 and 8,000 people who spend their days in workshops, and there's about 80 workshops in our state. If 20 years ago there were 3 or 4 times that amount, and we had many more thousands of people who spent their days in workshop. Consequently, though, we also have 32,000 people approximately who spend their days in day habilitation. And both of those options are changing. So going to be changing, not necessarily changing, but people are going to be having options and choices for new things to do during the day. And for people who are interested in employment, which should be everybody, we hope, they're going to have options for more job supports, possibly to work in an integrated setting in workshops that are being considered. Some of us feel better about that than others. Sandy's is sort of on the fence on this topic in terms of whether people would be, of how that might work. But the main focus is people are going to have lots more choices of what they do and where they spend their day, both through the home and community-based settings rule, but also based on some of OPWDD's transition plan now. So one of the other choices that people have is self-directed services, to be able to hire your own staff, and of course employment, where you hire staff that support you in that employment. For Sandy's, what we've been saying this past couple of years is we think that we ought to have a new concept, and this is something we're advocating for, is that people should be able to mix and match their days. The old world of people in day services is you spend your whole week in one particular service. And the new world is likely that people some days are working, some days they're doing something. They may be spending some days in some sort of a situation where they choose to be with some other people with disabilities, but they may also be doing some individualized volunteering. We call it inclusive volunteering, where people being supported to volunteer in a place where there's people without disabilities, and they're supported to be part of that organization, or where they're there and being supported to be in an included environment, where they get to know friends and have relationships and develop relationships. And I think that we're hoping that we have a lot of good examples of self-directed activities now, and we think that they're going to begin to be expanded. So some of the discussions in the MFP process is, we'll be getting into like what people can do during the day, and the choices and options should be expanding for everybody. Some people might need a lot of support, but some one-on-one supports are possible. And so this is a lot of new things are happening. A lot of new options have to be considered, and it's been a lot of advocacy by advocates and self-advocates for a long time that's helping to move this stuff forward. Helped a lot by the federal government, and of course, the last thing to mention is how important employment is. So, BJ, I know you have lots of stuff to say about all those things, so I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. And what Steve said kind of rang in my head, because it reminds me of an individual I'm working with now. He started out in day program. He went to workshop, then went through the day habilitation, and is now getting into the self-directed day services. And during a part of his his day habilitation day, he is employed by one of our malls in the Western New York area. He only spends one day there, but one of his dreams for a self-directed life is to work at a job for a longer period of time, find a residence where he can live with the staff support which he needs, you know, and it's just an evolving process. I enjoy seeing the evolving process, but honestly, and Steve, I hope can back me up here, that one of the things you'll probably get asked through the MFP process, is my workshop going to close? Because so many of the people with developmental disabilities that we serve who have been in a workshop for 20, 30 years, that's all they know, and all they've been hearing is that workshops are going to close, so you have to find somewhere else to go. That is a big fear among advocates here. Are they going to close? What's going to happen to me? Because not even the agencies know yet, because the information is changing every day, every minute. So I hope they get it set soon for everybody who enjoys the workshop and wants to stay there, because they have the connection with their friends, the staff, and that's all they've ever known.
Well, I'll back you up on that, BJ, because that's, you know, it's a concern we hear from a lot of people. And one of the things in our organization that we're doing is just trying to throw in some new ideas into this whole thing. So we've talked about, individualized days. And, you know, I started to talk about this a little bit before. I just want to emphasize this more, that you know, people who have choices of what to do in the day include choices to do something different on different days. And Gary Lind, who used to work for OPWDD and now is in the provider sector now in New York City, but he said something interesting at a meeting that was an interesting way of saying something that people at Sandy's have been saying for a long time. And what he said, and it was basically in response to some providers who say, what do you think of the future of day service is? And what Gary said was that he knows now that people want to mix and match their days. And what he means by mix and match is what we've been saying a little bit here, that, you know, people want to do different things on different days, you know, based on the choices that they have and their goals that they have. So somebody who might want to work, you know, the fact is right now, people who have jobs, and we haven't got the specifics on this. I don't have the specifics in my head on this because I haven't been able to get the exact statistics about the average hours that people work, let alone the amount of work, people that work 1 day a week or 3 days a week. And that's something that we need in our field right now to understand so we can advocate a little bit better. And I think those statistics are becoming available. But people have the option of working some, volunteering some, you know, spending time with their peers. That's another thing we're learning from self-advocates who have self-direction. Some people are deciding that some days they do joint self-directed activities, and they're engaging. One group out in Syracuse, for instance, went to Syracuse, got some support from some of the people that were working with them, and they were interested in theater, and together some people began to do some theater activities with some students in the Syracuse University that were doing drama, and it's been a nice kind of collaborative opportunity for people to be both included, but also to do something with some of their peers. And people, you know, one of the things we know that's from self-advocates, and it's normal really for people to want to hang out some together. And so, you know, so we're just encouraging lots of exploration of what people can do, and you know, the money follows a person concept works in the day services, needs to work in the day service as well. The people should be able to do some of the things they want to do on the days they want to do it with the support that they need, and so we're really encouraging people to think big and to use those person-centered planning processes, which is critical to helping people figure out what they want to do and how they can accomplish it and who can help them. So those are some of the things that we're really excited about, and hopefully in your work you can give some of that awareness to people you talk to, that people have choices. You've got choices in what you do during your lives, and you know, it takes a little bit of work, and it takes some envisioning and some imagination, and it takes a lot of support, but you can do it. So I don't know. Does anybody have any questions out there? We'll keep asking.
Like I said, just raise your hand, and I'll unmute anybody who wants to ask a question.
The MFP process will be peel away the onion as to what the person's options are and or the family's options to give the person the quality life we all want for ourselves as human beings. So the MFP process is so important, as Steve said, but it will peel away the onion. So I ask the people doing the MFP process, don't worry about talking to them and talking to the staff. We're all people, we're all human beings, and it's an explorative process. Life is exploration.
Well said. So, what actually, in terms of, let me ask a question, instead of asking you to ask questions, anybody have anything you want to add based on your experiences for the things that you're doing? Do you want to share some experiences that you have, or ask or tell us an experience that you have, and maybe we could talk about it together? Anybody have anything like that they want to get into? Because we could, we might be able to help a little bit, or we might be able to help each other.
Well, while we're waiting for somebody to raise their hand, I'll give you an example of a call. Oop, I've got somebody with a question. Hang on. Laura, go ahead. Laura?
Hi, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. I was very happy that you touched on how communication can sometimes be altered, specifically if you have someone with a cognitive disability. And I was hoping one of you might be able to offer advice for those of us with less experience in that arena on how to best prepare and respond if we see a behavior or a social skill that surprises us.
Can you clarify that a little bit?
Well, I was thinking of perhaps maybe I can give an example. If you're speaking with someone and you've met them for the first time, and perhaps this is an individual that has issues meeting people for the first time, and it might make them a little more excitable. Perhaps maybe, hand clapping or causing a tic or something of that nature. And I just wanted to be sure that people could be prepared for that so that the response wouldn't be something that would be offensive to anyone. So I was hoping to give some advice.
That's a great question. That's a great question. That's great. BJ?
I would say if they're excited and that's their way of saying hello to you at first, let them do that. Don't be nervous about that. Maybe that's their way of saying hello to you. Maybe that's their best way to communicate. And it's not, I don't look at people as having a behavior. What they're doing is what makes them unique. Everybody has their own uniquenesses, I call them when I train people. If that were me, everybody would say, me being a strong advocate, I have behaviors every day, but it's my way of being unique, and people I talk to honestly have done the hand clapping thing you're talking about, and I ask them, you're happy about something, right? And then the conversation starts from there with the staff, because the staff will say, that's Johnny's way of saying hello. The staff will let you know what those cues mean for that individual.
And BJ, maybe since we're talking about behaviors, one of the questions I know I've gotten from the staff or concerns is if they go and the staff member at the house says, Johnny's having behavior problems today or is having a bad day, and the staff are like, oh, well, should I insist on seeing him? And my kind of response to that is no. There's no reason that you can't go back a different day. That everybody has better and worse days.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You want to feel. Everybody wants to feel comfortable with the process, and when you do the MFP with an individual with a, as they say, so-called behavior, or my term is uniqueness, is that it might not be their day, but you want to give the individual and the staff an opportunity to give the individual the best life possible by asking them the questions that they've never been asked before, because that's what the MFP process will hopefully reveal. They've never been asked these questions before, and maybe it'll get the staff to think if they have difficulty communicating or are nonverbal. MFP is all about, for me, the opportunities that they've never had before.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, you know, it's such a good question in terms of how you hang out with people, and you need to think about it that way. You're at a person's house or where they spend their day. It's their place. It's their home. You're a guest in that situation. People might be nervous. Just, you know, what are these people doing here? That kind of thing. We don't know what people might be going through their minds. Just, you know, some people won't communicate that either, and some people just simply have things that are characteristics of who they are and how they express themselves, and they may be excitable, and so the best thing to do is not so much ignore it, it's just, you know, be with it, and then wait for that person to stop, and then ask them how you doing, what's happening with you, and see if you can get a response. I think part of the biggest challenge for many of the places where you go are people who don't say anything. And I think you'll meet some people in ICFs who don't communicate. You know, when I was an executive, when I first started working in this field in 1969, I worked with 28 men on a ward, me and another person, and I worked for a whole year there, and not one person ever knew my name. But I got to know those folks, and I think that part of when you're meeting with those folks, and you want to be with them, and probably there'll be somebody who knows them well, hopefully, who can talk to you a little bit about what they seem to like. You know, when people who don't communicate, doesn't mean that they don't communicate. They may not be able to tell you what they like, but we know things about people. People can still be involved. We can still work on helping to understand what they might like in their life by knowing what they seem to like. So, for instance, on food, you know, people may not be able to tell us what they like, but we learn from them what they like to eat by what they eat, and they may not be able to say what kind of music they like, but we learn what kind of music they like by what music they groove to, and we try playing music. So you know, it's just a question of just being comfortable, and getting to know the person a little bit. But more importantly, when you're talking with people, hopefully they've got some people in their lives who are going to be supporting them, who are if not already on a circle, or could be part of the basic for the circle. And I think that's one of the reasons why in engaging and starting, trying to get some appointments, it's important to ask that if people know people, who have people in their lives who might help them make these decisions, or staff people who particularly know them well, to have them present so you can learn from them some of their options, and to continuously let everybody know that MFP is for everybody, even people who are profoundly disabled and need incredible amounts of supports. We have examples in our field of fantastic examples of people who need 100% supports, who don't communicate directly about their lives, who are living in individualized situations and living good lives. We have Choices PowerPoint, and I can share this resource. And if people haven't seen our We Have Choices film, have people seen our film?
Yes, we did send that out to everybody, and if anyone on the line has not already seen that video, feel free to shoot me a email, and I'll send you a copy of the video.
I'll also send you a PowerPoint that we created before We Have Choices. It's called it's a We Have Choices theme, but we showed more people than in the film, and several of the people that we showed were people who had lived in institutional settings, and then group living situations, and then moved into their own places. And people who weren't able to communicate and for themselves directly, but are people who really benefit. And just to give you an example, there's one man, Kenny, who is living in his own IRA now. He's a one-person IRA that he's living. He had lived at home for a long time, but he moved from Willowbrook, actually, into his home, and he got a job in a. It sounds strange, but he got a job on a farm in Queens. There actually is a farm in Queens. Now, Kenny is a guy who never communicates anything verbally, and sometimes he communicates things in ways that people get a little nervous about, because he can be a little he can get upset. And but they were really, he had a good person-centered, some good person-centered planning, and some people who did some deep thinking and listening with Kenny's family and the people who knew him, and they began to just bring him around to show him some options for where he could spend his day. He went to this. Somebody had the idea, let's bring Kenny over to this farm, and he went to the farm, and well, people discover that what Kenny really likes, working in the hen house, and he's really careful about taking eggs out of and putting it into the egg carts and cleaning up the around the chickens, and really enjoys it. It's something he really likes, and the people who ran the place really fell in love with Kenny. They thought he was great to have him. There's one-on-one support to do that, but he's and there's many stories of people like that who because people persevered and people believed in new choices and options, and worked together using person-centered planning and some good family advocacy, he got exposed to an option that has become a lifelong opportunity for him. And in fact, just to tell you one of the complications of our system, when Kenny moved into an IRA, it became a little bit of a problem for him. Living at home, he could work 8 hours a day. Living in an IRA and get one-on-one supports. Living in an IRA, he could only get 6 hours a day, because we had this rule about not having a double billing of, not double billing, but two waiver services being billed at the same time for obvious reasons. And the residential services are 24 hours on the weekend days and 18 hours during the weekdays, and the 6 hours from 9 to 3 are generally the times that people are available for waiver services. So this is now one of our advocacy issues as an organization, to try to find ways to be flexible about these opportunities that people have. So people like Kenny, because Kenny doesn't like the idea, won't like the idea, and we're still working with him so that he doesn't have to experience the idea of only doing 6 hours a day instead of 8. And so, we have choices is also about advocacy, and you'll find things to advocate about, and we'd love to hear any of the stories you come up with or any of the thoughts you have, the things that are getting included in advocacy, systemic advocacy that we're going to be doing. But we want to make sure that there's many, many more Kennys and people whose family have some ideas that they may like, and get a chance to try a bunch of things and fall into things that really work for them. And there's lots of good stories like that are happening, and there'll be many, many more when we provide individualized opportunities to as many people. Yeah.
Steve, we're getting close to 11 o'clock, so I just wanted to kind of make sure there's nothing that we haven't covered here. So you talked about the HDS settings rule, self-direction.
Yep, the OPWDD is in the middle of a transformation plan. Clint and I from Self-advocacy have been on that committee. It's a big opportunity for our state. Lots of challenges in doing it. Where will the money come from? Many of us are asking. One of the end goals of the transformation is managed care. It is something that we're paying a lot of attention to and advocating around, and we'll be needing people's help. But it could be an option for people. And I guess I want to emphasize just the absolute importance of person-centered planning in all of this work. Nobody who moves from an ICF will do well without a good person-centered plan that identifies people in their life that can be supporting with them and that reflects their goals. And if you just slip over to that next slide, I can just quickly go through that. When we did our willpower, which I'll send you, you'll see this willpower slide. One of the things that we emphasize when we talk with people about their options is it's not just about what you do during the day, and it's not just about where you live. It's about all kinds of things. And we came up with 8 choices, but there's many dimensions for people. And we came up with work, learning, and teaching, which self-advocacy falls into that category, but taking classes, doing things in the community, neighborhood and community membership, being a member of a YMCA, when you go to, and going to the Y. Creative expression is arts and crafts and music. Family and friends. It's so important for people to be connected and have friends in the community. Having a home life. Everybody in our system should have an opportunity to have a place that they call home. A spiritual life, the opportunity to attend a church of your choice, even if you need a lot of support. If your family had a history of a certain church, family members might help people get reconnected to a church where they could meet people. Sports and adventure. And there's probably a dozen other dimensions, but what we want to make sure is that people in their plans and their activities and the things that they do, that we understand the things that they would like to be involved with in their life, or give them experiences so that they get to make some choices. But people have choices, and that's the dream, that's the goal, that's the hope. And it's really in the spirit of the home and community-based waiver. And it's been something that we've been talking about for a long time, and many people in our system have. We want to make sure it happens. So if you just switch over a little bit more, if you switch one more over, Suzanne. Oh, there it is. Sorry, sorry, I missed it. It looked the same. I'll just go back to the last one. Sorry. These are the, when for our organization, when we looked at it, we had a think tank that kicked some of this stuff off, and we're still saying that the partners in change in this are advocates, self-advocates, family members, community members, direct support allies, providers, OPWDD. And what we really should have is / advocates under self-advocates, advocates like NYAIL. All of us working together, using some passionate leadership and some values-based philosophy to try to make these kind of changes. We wrote this in 2006. This stuff is still very relevant. What you're doing is very, very important. Carrying that message to choice and opportunity and respect for people's choices. And I just go out there and do it with gusto. Call us up if you need some help. And I'll go to the last slide, and I'll get it in just in couple of seconds. This is a Mr. Fish cartoon that we threw in here, and you'll notice the red are the we's and the black are the me's, and Mr. Fish titled this as activism, and activism really is about creating a lot of people who begin to look at the evolution of our system as all of us working together, the we's, infiltrating the me's. This is really about a system that we all have to figure out, how we do one important thing, make sure that everybody has the life that they want. I don't know if that, are we finished now? Is it 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock?
Yep. So we'll just ask one more time if anyone has any questions. I don't see any hands being raised, but I want to just say thank you, Steve and BJ. I think it was great having the both of you, and particularly BJ with your experience with the state and kind of giving us the real scoop there. When you said van rides there, really resonated with me because we used to do van therapy because everybody had to go along on that van ride. So we decided it must be therapeutic. So
sometimes we do van therapy to mall therapy.
Yes. So thank you very, very much, and this will be available on the NYAIL website for people who were not able to attend today.
Great.
So I don't see any other hands, so thank you, everyone.